In the Fuzzy Memories podcast, we celebrate the good, the rad, and the fugly of the 80s and 90s.
We're three latchkey kids who made it out alive.
And in each episode, we break down all the culture that popped, 1 year at a time.
Whether it's the birth of legends...
I'm Lyme disease free today, and I have Whitney Houston and MTV to thank. Or audacious moves.
Imagine also the poor Golden Gate Bridge. You turn 75 and people have a party on you.
Yep. I don't want that.
Or even confusing PSAs.
And the stop, drop, and roll. I mean, I assumed
Yes.
as an adult I would catch on fire weekly.
All the time!
We've got a take that will make you laugh.
We've also got thoughts on all sorts of random phenomena and the most unmitigated of golf.
Why sharks can't be trusted, people can't be trusted, and rivers can't be trusted. It's collusion.
Of the highest degree.
Uh-huh.
You were counseling me to start my remarks with, first of all, bitch.
Everyone in that room would have snapped to attention.
It's going to be basically coffee lids, shark revenge, and then maybe like Matt Getz. God, we need to do something about him.
Join us every other Wednesday to celebrate the hits, the misses, and the misfits of the weirdest decades.
If I could tell my 14-year-old self from 1990 that I would be eating in a Cheesecake Factory in
Beverly Hills.
I'd be like, we did it. We did it, Joe.
We did it.
Listen and subscribe to Fuzzy Memories on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and your favorite podcast platform.
Hello and welcome to Broads and Books. I'm Erin.
And I'm Amy, and this is episode number 59. I'm Still Standing.
I'm still standing.
What song is it, Erin?
It's by Elton John.
Why'd you
and-
pick that song, Erin?
Well, a couple reasons. One, it's been in my head a lot because it's Mason's favorite song right now.
Really? It's Mason's
It-
favorite song?
Yeah,
Does
he
like
knows
the
all.
video too, or has he seen it?
I don't know if he's seen the video. He
Okay.
just really he wants it on all the time in the car. He knows all the words. Yes. Mhm.
Okay.
So it's been in my head, but I also felt like it was really appropriate for this week because we were going to spend some time talking about how our reading habits have changed during quarantine, during pandemic, and how different that has felt for both of us because it's been very different than our normal, and it feels a little like Survivor-esque, like, okay, I'm coming back. I can do this. Like, I can read again.
All right, coronavirus, you thought you knocked me down? No.
Yeah,
I can
no,
still
I'm
read.
coming back. I
Yeah.
can do this. Yeah.
Because that's the most important thing right now. I mean,
Yes.
it is for us.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't want to lose that part of myself.
Right. And I think we've talked about this a little bit in the last couple episodes that we've recorded via Zoom because, we're obviously thinking it's very different that we're not sitting across from each other, but there's so
Yes.
much else that's different too. How would you describe how your reading has changed?
Oh man, it was very strange. Like early on, I remember having the thought, okay, I'm going to be able to read, like my to be read pile is going to get so small. It's going to be great, and you're not distracted by new stuff at the library because you can't go. So, okay, wonderful. But the truth is that for quite a long time in the beginning, my attention span was terrible. I could not focus long enough to get into a book. And I think it was, underlying anxiety and feeling like everything was different every day. And it felt like my brain just didn't have the capacity to house another story or house another point of view.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It almost feels like your body is saying, like, I can't handle this right now. Like, I've got a lot of other stuff. Like, your brain is working overtime trying to handle all the scary news and everything and dealing with this threat that it perceives to itself. So your brain's just like, I gotta focus on other things, man. I can't focus on this great fiction book that you just opened up.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say maybe it's starting to slowly come back, but it's still different. The things I'm picking are different, which is why we wanted to do this theme. We thought we'd share some of the stuff that is getting us back into reading or, is helping us take steps to feeling more like ourselves in that respect.
Definitely.
But how do you think? Oh, sorry.
Oh, I think we were going to ask each other the same thing. Do you think there's been a time in your life that you remember struggling with reading like this before?
I don't specifically. outside of maybe college, but I think it was something different. Like in college, my reading life was so different because I was only reading what was assigned.
Yes.
And I didn't have the capacity to really read more on top of that.
Okay.
So I felt like that whole college years, I missed like all the bestsellers and all the great new fiction that was out because I was so busy, in the literature of what I was being assigned that I kind of like couldn't read in my normal way.
Yes. Yeah, I feel the same way. Like in college, definitely. And then when I was in grad school too, it felt even more because it was like you're devoting so much time thinking very critically to either some pieces of work or some pieces of writing. And reading wasn't as much of a joy anymore. It felt something more like something I had to check off my checklist,
Yeah.
But other than that too, like I feel like maybe major moments of upheaval in your life. Like I remember a really devastating breakup many years ago where so much of my life changed and nothing felt quite normal. And I don't think I read much during that time either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just when you don't have the capacity to. I mean, for people, I think reading is an emotional experience, and I think some people don't realize that. And so having the emotional ability to connect with a character or to get into a story or to take on more information is something that sometimes we're just not capable of when there's all this other kind of stuff going on around us. So
it's a great way to describe it, that it is an emotional experience. And we have too many emotions going on right now, and we just can't. We can't handle a fake character's emotion.
Yes, exactly. And you would think it's something that we love, so you would expect it to bring you comfort, but it's not the same kind of comfort that you find, in other things. So,
and we have discovered that it's not just us. We've talked to other people, friends of ours and family, and I know personally, even in my book club, there a lot of us are struggling. But at the same time, there are some people this is a perfect time, and they feel more able to read at this time. So, beautiful people I want to learn from. I don't understand how that is, but that's great.
Good for them, I say.
Yes.
Get it. How do you think that this is going to change, like, the publishing world overall, like the reading publishing world?
I would say that maybe a couple things. One, maybe we're a little more receptive to independent bookstores now. Part of that being, right now we're kind of in the mode, or at least I see on social media and among friends and everything, we're feeling like we want to support local businesses. We want to help keep people's jobs open and places of business open. So maybe, and I've seen a lot of independent bookstores that I follow doing special promotions and having curbside pickup and stuff like that. So maybe that's a little more, it's going to be a little more front of mind for some people, having local bookstores. At least I'm crossing my fingers that that's the case. I wonder too, if people now during this time are taking advantage of some of libraries' digital content, and maybe that will continue after this quarantine. Maybe they'll understand the insanely huge value of libraries, both their digital books, hardcover books, like everything that they have.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that in terms of independent bookstores, but that's very valid. Is, people that really love those and are supporting those don't want to see anything, kind of like local restaurants. They don't want to see anything happen where they take a backslide or they can't come back from this. And so I hope that's,
it's very precarious anyway for any small business, but especially a lot of independent bookstores. So that maybe is a prediction, maybe it's a hope. I don't know. But do you have any thoughts for how this will affect us later?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's making people think outside the box in terms of marketing and reaching people. I think that that's something that is probably going to continue to be that way. How can we use some of these mediums? Not that we don't want some of the face-to-face stuff, not that it's still not going to be great to go see that author in person, but maybe there's some more ways to connect with people all over without, because some authors that we love, we know they didn't go on book tours because they weren't big enough, or the publisher didn't expect them to be that big, so they didn't support that, and this might be something that makes some of those books that are so great that struggle to get some of the attention because they don't have a big name behind them. It might even that playing field a little bit. And
great point. Yeah.
Make people be a little more interested in hearing that and paying attention to that. So I've also heard things which could be interesting that, there's some part of the publishing world that tends to be a little bit stuck in the past.
Yeah.
And I've heard a lot of people say, maybe this is the time that they'll move away from paper galleys and they'll get on the electronic boat, more so. Or maybe they'll move away from feeling like they have to support a brick and mortar location and getting more employees that are all over that can contribute to marketing all over. So it might open up some of those thoughts about what a company looks like.
So it could be a painful process, but maybe also like one that might sustain us in the future too.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Well,
Sure.
Erin, I've got one final question for you. What's a reading habit that other people have that you can't stand in best or worst times?
Okay. This is one I'll just never understand. I don't care what you do to your books. Your books are yours. If you want to write in them, fold the pages, whatever. Reading the last page. Do you know people that do this? I don't get it. What are you doing? What are you doing? There's no way I could do that and that would not be in my head for the rest of the book.
Yes. Yeah. When I was a kid, I was reading, do you remember the collection of books, North and South? John, I don't even remember the name, but it was this like very like trade paperback, like, there was lots of sex scenes and I was a teenager and I loved it. But there was one moment where I was like, because I think at that time I had a sort of a habit of looking towards the end, and I was flipping through the book and just kind of seeing like, 50 pages ahead, what happens. And one of the main characters died on that page and I was devastated. So I think I learned my lesson from then on to never look at it.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Plus, I think that how just as important as the first sentence of a book is, I think how an author chooses to end their book is also very important. And I feel like it takes something away. Like you can't understand those final sentences without understanding how you got there.
Yes.
So that's why I just can't get on board with it. What about you? Is there something that you don't like?
We've talked about how I want to hurt you sometimes because you have the binding of books, and you really enjoy that, and it hurts my soul. And when I see someone doing that, or I get a library book and that's happened, like I just it's tough. But another thing is also like when you get a hardback book, I usually take the dust jacket off to protect it. I don't want to tear it. I don't want to get like smudges and whatever on it. So when I see people reading it with the dust jacket, I'm like, A, that seems like a little like clumsy. Like it looks like it's going to be difficult. And B, you're going to mess that up.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful, beautiful dust jacket.
You know what? That's a good one because I feel the same way about that. I just think I don't even think you like reading if you have the dust jacket on.
Exactly.
You're faking it. You got a magazine behind there that you're reading because no one reads with the dust jacket on unless you want people to see what you're reading.
You're right. They're reading smut behind that.
Yes. Harlequin romance, and you have like some great nonfiction up there acting like you're getting your PhD. We see you and we don't believe you.
I was gonna say, read your Harlequin romance and show it to the world. Own it.
Put it out there.
Yes.
Dust jackets are to prevent dust. Come on.
Exactly.
Jeez.
Well, how about we move to some picks?
Yes. So we kind of did this a little different. We did things that we have been reading that's helping us get back into feeling like ourselves in the reading world.
Yes. And the biggest thing, honestly, for me with fiction was actually rereading some books. And I was telling you about this, that somehow maybe the idea of not knowing what's going to happen in a book is scary in a weird way, if that makes sense. It's I don't know. I was really struggling with starting and stopping a lot of books, partly because of attention, partly just because I just couldn't invest myself in something new. So finding something that I had already read, somehow it allowed me to get back into the act of reading and still get some joy of it because I knew where it was going, but I didn't remember all the details along the way. Right. So there was still some discovery. There was still some like surprises. But yeah, so rereading was the way that I kind of worked through it. But here's the thing. When I decided I was going to reread something that I already owned, I looked through my library and I read some dark shit. And there was not a light beach read to be had anywhere in my library. So I had to determine what I could handle at this time. And what's funny is the book that I found that got me past this is one that I've actually already recommended. So I know we're sort of breaking the rules in that way.
Hey, that's all right.
Yes, by, re-recommending. But I picked a book that I recommended in episode 28, which is called American War by Omar El-Akkad.
Yes.
And at first glance, this is also extremely dark, and it doesn't seem like it would be a great way to get back into reading, but somehow it was. So if you remember I'll just go over sort of the main plot. It's set in the far future when another civil war breaks out. Maybe because it's so far in the future, I was able to just think, okay, it's fine. I can handle 2020 right now.
Right.
I'll think about 2075. I mean, I'll be dead by then. So it's fine.
No big deal.
Yeah. So this time there's a civil war that's broken out between North and South over the use of fossil fuels, and also this increasingly expansive divide between those that have and those that have not.
Mm-hmm.
So there's one young woman who has to pack up her Louisiana home and move to a refugee camp in Mississippi. And at that camp, a man radicalizes her to be a sort of freedom fighter for the South. And what's great is, I don't know about you, Erin, but when I reread something, I get a lot more out of it than the first time. And maybe because the first time I'm just tearing through it sometimes to get through the plot, and I'm enjoying it so much. So this time around, I got a lot more out of it. I realized how carefully Omar El-Akkad transplanted today's forever war, pretty much, in the Middle East. Every component of that. How other countries get involved, and how there's this just nonstop thirst for revenge, this never-ending vengeance cycle. He transplanted it here, and it makes it so much more. I got a lot out of it thinking about that. I also saw a lot of small moments that I hadn't picked up on last time. And I can't fully explain why this was the best thing I could read right now, but it was. It's sort of broken through that, that frustration, that malaise that I had. And maybe some of it's comparison, as bad as it is right now, we're not in an all-out civil war. So at least not yet.
True. Okay. Yeah.
Perspective,
Right.
Yeah. So, hey, if you like sort of dark books, and I recommend it.
I think that's a great recommendation. Because rereading sometimes is amazing, because you do find all this stuff that you maybe missed the first time, or you were busy thinking about something else, so you get more immersed in it. And you gave me this advice pretty early on when this all happened, and that's kind of where you started, was I'm going to reread some stuff and see if that helps. And I think that was such good advice, because it's something we don't often think of, there's so much to read, I don't want to not read something new. But sometimes those ones that we get so much out of, we could just keep going back to. And
yes That said, I could not return to The Handmaid's Tale again, because it's just too much. There's a lot of closeness, and I don't like that. So pick your rereading carefully.
Yeah, that's probably good advice. Yeah. You don't want to really go too pandemic-y right now. All those people that were watching Contagion.
Yes.
What are you doing?
I started a book that's all about people that have been quarantined for 3 years. And I'm like, oh my God, no, I can't handle this right now. No.
I'm out. Yeah. I agree with you. Well, the way that I started to get back into it, and it's been going better, is I went to short stories, because I felt like I could get into smaller groups. It wasn't a huge commitment. I could kind of push myself in a weird way, finish it. And so my recommendation in this episode is I have a subscription to the One Story. So if you go to onestory.com, they send you one short story a month in this little paperback form. It's very small. They're located in Brooklyn, New York. And their whole mission is kind of to support and get out their short stories and authors that write them. And there is a wide range of authors. Some you've never heard of, some you have heard of, that get published in One Story. But every month you get one, little, and I throw it in my purse a lot because I could read it in line somewhere, but this, I've noticed that I went back, pulled all of those out, and I just kind of have them out, and it's something that I can go to and I can get away for a minute and read, but I also don't feel like I'm so far lost in it that I can't, get back and do something else if I need to.
Yeah.
So I've really enjoyed that. Like I said, it's a subscription service. So if you go to onestory.com, you can subscribe, and then they send you one a month. They also do some writing workshops and things, like online writing workshops. But this actually led me to what you were doing, which is rereading.
Mhm.
And I kind of started to reread some classic young adult books
Oh,
with my
wow.
kids, because I was like, okay, I can reread this. I can get into it with them.
Yeah.
So like Evan and I read The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros recently.
Wow. How did Evan like that?
He loved it. And he'd read it before too. So it was kind of something familiar we both did. And the first time we read it, we read it like out loud to each other. And this time we just read it at the same time and then talked about, what we got out of it. So, and then with Mason, I did some choose your own adventure books, which is perfect right now for keeping his attention, getting him kind of hooked in. And so that's been really fun. And it was a great way to jump off for me from the short stories and then go to something else familiar. And I've noticed within the last couple weeks that I picked up some other books and have started and felt a little bit more like my reading self again.
Yes.
So
yes. Also, can I just take a moment and say, like, how incredible that is, that how much you cultivate reading with your kids. And you've done this for a long time, but like, I know you and Evan used to read things and then you'd ask him to write about it, just like little short, even letters, did you call it? Yeah.
We used to write Post-it notes to each other. I would read ahead of him and write Post-it notes, and then he would comment on the Post-it notes when he read it. So it was kind of like no matter where we were, reading together, even if, I was reading in the morning and he was reading before bed or whatever it was. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, and I think for them too, it's a weird time, and they're trying to do school at home and do all these things. And so kind of like getting away from that a little bit was helpful. I could tell, for Mason, getting away from, he's in kindergarten, so getting away from it being like, this is how I read type of thing.
Yeah.
So, and just be, someone's reading to me and I can, offer things. Yeah. So anyway, if you are interested, this One Story subscription, I would have recommended that at some point anyway, because it's great to discover a new author. It's great to discover a new story. Some of them I love, some of them I'm like, but that's fun too, know? Yeah. So, yeah.
That's a great suggestion. Well, thinking about like other genre picks, I'm actually, I don't know, but I've been finding it easier to read nonfiction and memoir right now. And you're nodding along. So it's the same kind of thing. Okay.
Yes.
I have tried to figure out why that is. And I thought that maybe because some of these things are in the past, like they've happened. And the person writing about it has come out the other side and they've learned lessons or they've had a reckoning of some kind. So it feels like a complete story. And maybe because we're in the middle of this pandemic, we can't handle like incomplete stories, or we can't handle, like
unknown.
Yes, unknown for sure. So a book that I just finished that's super dark, I'll be honest. But it's about a past event, and somehow that was okay to read right now, besides the fact that it's a killer book. And I got this recommendation from our interview with Kate Milliken.
Oh, yeah.
I chose The Other Side by Lacey M. Johnson. And Kate had talked about it a little bit, and both you and I were just horrified, but also intrigued. And so I immediately had to get this. So when the memoir opens, Lacey is running out of an apartment with a steel bolt attached to her arm and then racing to the police station. And she reports that she was kidnapped, held in a soundproof cell, and raped by an ex-boyfriend who then fled the country and was never captured. So all of those facts are horrific. But from there, Lacey writes about the relationship, how even before all this, there was some violence and there was some scary stuff, but she was in a situation where she couldn't see herself out of it. She couldn't find a way away from this guy. She didn't have really a support system. She was very young. Her family wasn't great. So she writes about that, but then she also writes about the aftermath. The kidnapping took place in 2000, and the book was published in 2014. So she details she's had some time in order to kind of see how she reacted to this and how it sort of had repercussions through the rest of her life. Like she rushed into a marriage. She was suffering from panic attacks. She was moving around constantly. She was getting married again. So there's that. And then she does talk about the actual event too. So you get those details, but it's not until later in the book until you understand what this really meant to her. And somehow that structure was also extremely it was just gripping and it was easy to get into. She writes beautifully. And after reading, I remember that Kate Milliken said in our interview that after this book came out, Lacey was approached at a reading for this book. And a reader said, don't you wish that the guy had died, or something to that effect?
Yeah.
And wouldn't that be justice? And then Lacey wrote a book about that question. So that's going on my list too. I want to read that and see, how she responded to that.
Absolutely.
I think this book will challenge you, but it will still feel like something you can read during this time, if that makes sense.
Wow.
Yeah.
You've mentioned a couple times when we've been talking that you've been reading this and it was very good and you were excited to share. So I put that on my list too, because I need to read it, because I do want to read the justice one too, but I feel like you got to read this one first.
Yeah,
so
for the context, for sure.
That's a great option.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so same thing as you. I feel like nonfiction's been a little easier, and I'm actually going to recommend a book that I've had for a long time, and I haven't read until now, and for whatever reason, it was speaking to me, and so I read it during this time, and it's called Burnout: The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle by Emily Nagoski and her sister Amelia. So if you remember, I recommended her Come As You Are in episode 35, Sex Stuff. Yes.
At that point, didn't you mention this book and that you had it on your list? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It was published in 2019. So her and her sister got together and wrote it. And I'm going to read you the beginning. It's kind of like the blurb that they put out about it. It's inside the dust jacket. It's everywhere. And it just nails exactly what this book is about. So if you hear this and you think that, I could use a book like that, you're right. This is it. So here, burnout. Many women in America have experienced it. What's expected of women and what it's really like to be a woman in today's world are two very different things. And when women exhaust themselves trying to close the gap between them, how can you love your body when every magazine cover has 10 diet tips for becoming your best self? How do you lean in at work when you're already operating at 110% and aren't recognized for it? How can you live happily and healthily in a sexist world that is constantly telling you that you're too fat, too needy, too noisy, and too selfish?
Oh my God.
I mean, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So instead of telling you to ignore all these obstacles and just figure out a way to get through it, this book is like, here's how you fight back. Here's how you don't buy into this shit. Here's how you can solve this for yourself, not by finding the perfect diet and finding the perfect job and having work-life balance, but by following, the inside and doing what you feel is right instead of following all these other things, expectations people are setting up for you. So I think it spoke to me now because we've talked about kind of this need to be productive all the time.
Yes. Which is
feel like you're accomplishing something.
Yes.
Yeah. And I was just struggling with that. And then I saw this on my bookshelf and I was like, man, I haven't gotten to that yet. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to. And I think that oddly, it was the perfect time to read it because I think that some of the information, advice, the lessons in the book probably sunk in more now than if I was reading it during my normal life. I think we hear about that all the time now, the new normal. And I think I'm starting to think about what do I want it to look like on the other side? Like this has been so different. What can I take from this that is great that I want to keep?
Yeah.
I needed to slow down in a lot of respects. So what can I take and move forward? And there's just so much great stuff in this book. And they've got actual exercises that you can do, just like in Come As You Are, little worksheets. This is not if self-help turns you off, that is not what this book is. This is empowerment. I almost didn't share it because I was struggling with a way to explain what it is without making it sound like some magic bullet. They're not selling it like that either. They're just saying hey, let's all get on the same page and recognize that this is completely unrealistic across the board. You're fighting a game you can't win because no one's ever telling you the rules until you get to the end. And then they're like, nope, that wasn't it. And so it just to me, it kind of reminds me of like anti-diet, the fuck it diet.
Yes.
Not in that it's specific necessarily to, you know, diet culture, but that's a part of it. And it's a part of the expectations that women have, not only for their bodies, but their professional life, their family life, what they should look like, what they should accomplish, what they should be in society. So I think it's great right now because our minds are kind of already focused on what the future is going to bring. So this was like a great read to go, okay, you know what, I kind of want to reshape some things. So I'm rereading it. I'm doing your suggestion.
Wow.
Right after I finished it, I started it again because I was like, okay, I think I got the main part, but now I want to go through it again to really understand, you know, what are my pitfalls and where am I kind of falling into these traps and how can I not do that anymore?
Well, that's a huge endorsement too, that you finished it and then immediately started again.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a book that you should buy on your own because like I said, there's the worksheets and the exercises, you know, that type of thing. So there's stuff you're going to want to write down and mark up and have probably. So like I would recommend it for that too. But it's very easy to understand. It's very accessible. And I already loved her writing from Come As You Are. Yeah. So it was an easy sell, but it's very well done.
Shit. Yeah. That's going on my list. Like I need to buy that right now. You're right. That paragraph too, that described it, like everything there. I was like, yeah. So, and then like they have some different lessons in the book. And like one of them is about how you can complete the biological stress cycle and return your body to a normal state of relaxation. How to manage the monitor in your brain that regulates the emotion of frustration. How the bikini industrial complex makes it difficult for women to love their bodies and how you can defend yourself against it. Yes.
Great timing because we're headed into summer. So, you know, screw everyone that thinks that they have to get in a summer bod.
Yes. Spoiler alert. There is no summer body. It's just your body. And
yeah. Thank you. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. So there's some great, just killer stuff in there. And it's probably not anything that maybe in your best moment you haven't thought like, okay, this is insanity. This is how it should be. But we don't really know how to like implement that or really complete it all the way. And I'm not a doctor and they are. So
yes. So wait, both of the sisters are doctors?
Now that I say that, I think she is. I think the sister is too. Yeah. Actually,
well, that's a successful family.
Yes. She's, Emily's a PhD and Amelia is a DMA.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
Killing it in that family.
Yeah, no kidding. What if when we collaborate on a book, because obviously, what do you think we should write about? So many options.
There's so many things. I think it's going to be like one of those books that no one's going to be able to sell because it doesn't go in a category. They're going to be like, well, there's a fiction part, and then they told a short story, and then there was a part about how not to be weird, and then there was a part about embracing your weird, and then there was a part of just random weird things that happened to them.
I was just picturing a lot of lists of all the things we hate.
Yeah, and then there was the list section. So there you go. And then there was some really badly drawn animations at the end.
Yes.
Done.
Listen, if there's not a category for this in publishing, there should be.
We're going to make one. Yeah. We're going to make it.
Well, thinking for pop culture,
yes.
At first, as this quarantine sort of took hold, I was kind of finding the same thing as with books. I was rewatching old movies that I knew that I loved because I knew they were going to be slam dunks, I wanted to revisit things that I knew I enjoyed. So I watched a lot of stand-up comedy, like John Mulaney, Seth Meyers, Amy Schumer, Leslie Jones, like all of those Netflix specials. If you're needing a laugh, just watch any of those. They're fantastic. I also watched like comedies with funny women that I like Emma Stone and Amy Poehler, and those are always great too. But then I found something new that really sucked me in, and that was Little Fires Everywhere on Hulu.
Yes.
We talked about this briefly because this is one of those books that you love, so you're a little hesitant about getting into the show.
Well,
and I can completely understand that. I think that I knew this had the potential to be great. So maybe in that way it sort of fell into the sure thing category, so I was less like afraid to try it. Because it's Reese Witherspoon and Kerry Washington. And both of them are fantastic. But also both of them in their like professional lives are prioritizing women-led stories. And I just kind of support that. And I thought that's so cool. This show too, I found out like they chose, I think, almost all women directors, writers. Like they have a very diverse writers table. So they really like are putting their, you know, their priorities out there and then following up with them.
Which is awesome.
Yeah. And so this was based on a book by Celeste Ng. And it is 1997 in Shaker Heights, Ohio. And Reese Witherspoon is Elena Richardson, who is an upper middle class, middle-aged white woman with 4 kids. And she is the kind of woman that insists that she doesn't see color and that she earned everything that she has and that she's just being a good mom when she pokes her nose into other people's business.
Yes.
And then Kerry Washington is Mia Warren, who is a Black woman artist with a teenage daughter who is constantly moving from city to city. And at first you're not understanding why, but at the beginning they've moved to Shaker Heights. So Elena rents a house to Mia and their kids start hanging out. And from there's all these like little and big moments that build up to this massive reckoning on race, class, motherhood. And from the first scene, you see that this whole story is going to culminate in Elena's house burning to the ground. So there's mysteries of like, who did this fire? Like, why does Mia keep moving around? What are Elena and Mia hiding? So I think it's just plain good drama. But also these incredibly like nuanced discussions that are happening. And in some ways you see how we as a society have moved on from this, but also you see so many ways that we have not, that this is still very, very relevant. And, you know, Erin, I will say that I watched a few behind the scenes things after finishing the show, and they did say specifically they changed the ending from the book. So I do wonder, like, you know, if that will affect your viewing as well, you know?
Yeah. Well, first I want to point out how awesome we are as a podcast that's still going, because I recommended this really early on in our podcast episodes. And I think I said, oh yeah, Reese Witherspoon's making a show, and we're still on the air when that show is out.
Yeah, we are.
So that's awesome. And yes, that has been part of my hesitation, but also my interest, because I do want to see how it matches up and how they did that. I know you and I talked about that. Celeste Ng was a big part of the production and writing of it, which gave me a lot of like, okay, I do need to watch this because, you know, authors are generally very protective and want that to be great. And she definitely gives that impression in all of her social media and publicity that she felt really good about it. And you know.
And in this behind the scenes that I was watching, they did talk to her, and she's like, I really liked what they did with the ending, and I really liked this.
Oh, good. Yeah.
And she also talked about that there are some like storylines that were just sort of hinted at in the book, but in the show they had the space and the time to really dig into it, and she really liked it too. So
okay, well then I think you might have convinced me.
Oh boy, well shit, don't blame me if you watch it and then you hate it.
Oh no, I will. Yeah.
Okay.
Just kidding. I won't.
Fair enough. Okay. Yeah.
So in a super like another weird ride or die moment, the pop culture that I picked for today was John Mulaney's stand-up.
Oh my god! But seriously, how good is John Mulaney's stand-up?
They're so good. And Mike and I watched all 3 of them. The first one was out in 2012, and it's still hilarious. Like, it's the best. It's so funny. And then there's one from 2015 and one from 2018. And they're all amazing, and they're all hilarious. And I laughed so hard. And it was such a great departure and break. And I was going to say that, too, that it led to a bunch of other stand-up we've been watching. Like, Michael Che has one on there. We watched Seth Meyers again. You know, just... there's something about comedy that's helpful, and it kind of takes you away for a minute, and maybe you feel like you don't have to concentrate that hard to get it. You're just kind of along for the ride, and it's hilarious. And John Mulaney, I feel like, is a good one because like everybody finds him funny. I mean,
yes. And I think my favorite is the most recent one, the Radio City Music Hall, because there's a huge part about stranger danger for us kids growing up in the 70s and 80s. And if you had any memory of that, it is fantastic. So yeah.
Oh God, so good.
Yeah.
So good. Yeah. And I love comedy like that, where they take something that everybody has this collective experience, but no one's really put it in that category of how like out of body and weird that actually was. You know, it was great. terrific.
And I think
So
with all the comedians that you mentioned and I mentioned too, there's definitely like discussion of our political environment and some of the, terrible shit that's going on, but it's packaged in such a way that you're like, okay, it's okay. I can laugh at it. Yay.
yeah,
All
I
is
love
well.
and I remember that, but when we rewatched Seth Meyers, I love that in his most recent special, he says, okay, there's a button that's going to appear at the bottom of your screen, and you can skip this part if you want, because I'm going to talk about politics. And like a little menu option pops up that says skip politics, and you can just go to the next, like, start of his next set.
Yes.
You're like, that is hilarious in and of itself.
Yeah.
Of course I didn't skip it because I
Of
have to know
course not.
everything that Seth Meyers says. But
No, you would never yeah. I also, I've been taking some joy in, because some of the late night hosts have done like versions of at home shows.
yeah,
And they're doing like remote interviews and stuff. And Seth Meyers is doing his home stuff from a weird attic with a tiny little door that he keeps like remarking about, but he's like, don't know what's behind it kind of thing. And then there's like the copies of the Thornbirds next to him. And he's like, yep, they just keep multiplying because it's an attic. And that's how, so there's so many more elements of him that I love.
yes. The first one I tuned into, I was like, wait a minute, what's happening here? I like it.
He also did a remote interview with John Mulaney recently.
He did. You sent me the clip, and I loved him even more because he talked about Real Housewives of New York.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
there's another way into my heart. It's Real Housewives. So yeah, so I think that's another great way to get some pop culture right now. If you're kind of maybe movies, documentary stuff too much, great. Watch a stand-up special.
Yes.
Tons of them on Netflix. You can't go wrong.
Great choice.
Yes.
And then I also recommend following Netflix is a Joke on Instagram, because it has little clips of a lot of comedy specials. And that's just a nice quick hit of
That
funny.
is a nice quick hit.
Right
Yeah.
into the feed. Yeah.
Well, and it's a great way to find out comedians you might not have heard of, because sometimes until they get big and then you go back and watch their specials, like you might be able to get in on something earlier.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, all that
Giving and giving.
giving and giving.
Yes.
So good at this. Positive affirmation.
Should we just talk for a few minutes about how great we are?
I think so. I think that's warranted. Yeah. I think that
yeah.
seems good.
I mean, like you said, we've been doing this a year. Killing it.
Killing it. Killing it.
By now, all the listeners have stopped and just thrown their
Yeah.
phones away.
They're like, we got all the recommendations.
You're
We're
not
done.
killing it.
You don't want to hear the end part. This is like if they had a skip button like Seth Meyers, skip ending, people would probably do it every time. They're like, they can never land the plane ever. It just burns up in the air.
We never promised we could land planes.
No, I don't even know why you got on this plane.
Yeah.
There's no passengers. What are you doing?
And little tiny ass seats no one can fit in anyway. So why are we on this plane?
Yeah, I'm not giving you peanuts
Nope.
or pretzels.
No. Or those
Now-
stripped waffle things that sometimes I
Yeah.
see. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Those little waffle.
this-
Yeah, that took a weird. Okay.
Okay. Well, I hope that some of our picks have helped you through
Yeah.
getting back into reading, getting back into
Mhm.
pop culture. And hey, maybe some of our listeners have tips as well for how they're getting through their own sort of block about reading. And if you do, we'd love to hear
Yeah. That would be fantastic.
them.
But in the meantime, if you're wanting to go through some of our old picks or you want to reread some stuff, you can always find that on our website with all the show notes and things that we've talked about. So that's a great reference for you if you're looking for a movie or a TV show or a great book, a nonfiction read. It's all there.
It is.
Do it.
And soon, listeners, soon, Erin and I will be in the same room again.
I hope it's very soon.
And we'll record on real microphones again. And we'll just stare into each other's eyes.
There'll be just one episode of nothing of us just staring at each other.
And just like shuffling where we're touching each other.
Yeah. Just like, oh, I'm touching her hair.
Touching
Oh, no,
yep.
this is her clavicle. I got her elbow.
Oh, I touched her eye. Oh, there it is.
Oh, okay. Oh, now kind of blind. Kind of poked her eye. Okay.
It's going to be great, listeners. It's going to be great. But
It's going to be great.
Happy reading.
I'm up again. Same night, another dream. Before trying this recording thing, I didn't remember much of anything of these dreams. I didn't remember much from any of the women. And one night of doing this, and it's broken things open. The dreams they're in me, and they're coming out of me, and...
Talk to me. I am not broken. I am the most whole, most real.
Cause their despair. I cause their despair. I wait for the word. I wait for the word. Witch. Witch. Witch.
Look at the mad woman in her cage. She was a woman with holes inside her. That was the heaviest factor, the final evidence, the heart of the issue.
Somehow, you understand this. You hear me. Wherever you are, whatever this is, you... This isn't a dream journal anymore. It's not. It's just fact. Because now this is some sort of record. What are these dreams? Maybe there's a better question. Who are these women? Weird Woman is a Broads and Books production. All 9 episodes are available January 10th. Listen and subscribe to Weird Woman on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and your favorite podcast platform. That's WYRD Woman, wherever you listen to podcasts.